How's it going, everybody? I'm Evo of the Lineman Lounge, and I'm bringing you the last in our short segment, this new series that we're doing, covering off-season outlooks for all 32 teams in the NFL before the beginning of the new season. Now, I am recording this the day of the final game of the year, the big one. So hopefully things are as up to date as they can be, as I've done this series all along to make sure all these teams are accurate. But I am human. So if I made some mistakes, I apologize. Let me know, comment, subscribe. Let me know where I've done things wrong, what I could do better, and your thoughts on the outseason outlook for each and every team in the NFL. That being said, the 2023-24 season is wrapping up today. And for most of the NFL teams, including both teams after today, they'll be looking forward to their future. And with the de facto offseason basically already having begun, it's a good opportunity for us to take a quick and concise look at each NFL squad, their cap situation, free agents, things like that, in order to determine where each team is going into the offseason and then different ways and thoughts on how they can attack their offseason. I've done all this research using a lot of different databases, including PFF and other sources on the internet, in order to kind of concisely put all this information together. And today we're going to be going over my NFC North. All right. I promise I didn't set it up this way to go over the Vikings first, but we're going to start off with our Minnesota Vikings. So, as a Vikings fan, I feel like I do have a pretty good understanding of what's going on with the team, where they stand, and a lot of ideas of what to do. Probably more so than any other team, which is kind of where this whole series boiled down to. It's I know my team super well. I have a lot of deep, passionate thoughts about what to do with this team. And with the other teams in the NFC North, I have a better idea than I would with other teams. But I really didn't understand what was going on with the rest of the NFL as good as I could have. And I wanted to give myself a better idea and a better knowledge of where each team stood so that way I could better predict and theorize what each team should do. So, with the amount of information and depth that I'm going to be able to go into with my team in the NFC North today, hopefully you'll be able to do a better job with other teams as well, and give me and the Lyman Lounge your input on your team and your division. So with the Vikings, we finished off the year 7-10, pretty dismal compared to last season, which obviously 13-4 is a very good record. They went 8-1, and after that Bills win, that very special Bills win last year, they were actually a 50-50 team and ended up losing in the wild card round of the playoffs, which kind of might spell a little bit where this team was going. Now, it was a team focused around on the offense with Kevin O'Connell as the new head coach, but it was a team that had a bad draft class brought in on Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's first draft, which makes sense. You're using a lot of the old scouts and old theories from the previous regime. This year turned out a lot better as far as the draft. Free agency, I'm still kind of iffy on. But we had a lot of injuries. You lose your star quarterback in Kirk Cousins. You have guys like a TJ Hawkinson go down with ACL, defensive players go down. And in general, on that defense, I mean, I can list a lot of guys on that team that I think are young, good, future role players. But if you look from outside the team in, there's one name. That's Daniil Hunter. He was basically the only star power on that defense, and Brian Flores was able to do fantastic things to actually make that defense effective. PFF had our offense ranked 10th in the league, which, given the fact that they lost their quarterback, who was putting up top five numbers, potentially MVP conversation numbers, until he tore his Achilles, uh, finishing 10th is pretty good. But on the defensive side, again, bereft of talent, the defense ranked 25th when last year they ranked dead last. I went into this year hoping to get into the mid to high 20s because I felt like that was a good improvement just from bringing a new, fresh, better scheming coordinator in. Now, while we were ranked 25th by the end of the year, there were times this year where we were a top five ranked defense. They were probably exceeding what their expectations were and what everyone thought that they could do. But that kind of shows what a good scheme and healthy players can do for your squad. And the fact that Brian Flores did not get another interview this year, which I believe stems from the fact that he still has a pending legal action against the league. He won't get another head coach shot, I think, until that's resolved, which sucks for him. But as a Vikings fan, I'll absolutely take it because I love the guy. Um, we're just going to be able to build that defense even more. Uh, the scheme is going to be there. That mind as the defensive coordinator is going to be there. And I'm pretty sure we're probably going to add some talent in the offseason this year. Um, so as of right now, the Vikings are expected to have an effective cap space of 19.7 million in the positive. We do have a fair amount of free agents, a bunch of guys that would like to resign. But our biggest issues revolve around two players overall, Kirk Cousins and Daniil Hunter. Both Kirk Cousins and Daniil Hunter are free agents this year. Both players have said that they want to come back to the team, and I think both of them, in some respects, would be positive resignings for the team. But I really do want to move in a different direction, specifically on the offense and at quarterback. Kirk Cousins this year is owed a dead cap hit of 28 million, whether he's on this team or not. If we resign him, we can start to maneuver that money again. We can start to push some of that off into the future, especially whatever contract he signs, that'll be pushed way down the line, kicking the can. The thing is that Kirk Cousins is going to be a 36-year-old quarterback who has very rarely won playoff games. He's good statistically, but he's coming off an Achilles tear. And he likes guaranteed money, a lot of guaranteed money, which has put us into the financial situation that we're in. Uh, the rumor floating around is that he's wanting roughly 45 million a year for at least 2 years, fully guaranteed. And when you're a 36-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles tear, that's very difficult to do. Not every quarterback is Tom Brady. Not everyone can play into their 40s. And he's very quickly approaching that level. We don't know what sort of mobility he's going to have after the Achilles tear, but he wasn't a super mobile quarterback beforehand. And this league needs quarterbacks that can move around in the pocket, be a little bit more mobile, allow plays to expand when things break down. Kirk Cousins doesn't bring that sort of level to our game. I am not a Kirk hater, and a lot of people who are Vikings fans are Kirk Cousins haters. I'm not one of them. I'm happy with what he's done with our team and how they've grown. I think he's a good guy. And given other situations, I would absolutely like to have him on my team. I feel like a lot of teams out there could really want him as a free agent because of what he brings. But the situation that we're in, where we are in this kind of perennial half rebuild, half competitiveness, you can't compete when you can't build your roster because you have a quarterback making that much money. You look at teams like the 49ers, they have an all-star studded roster, but the quarterback isn't being paid because he's on a rookie contract. He's a guy that exceeded expectations. He's on a rookie contract, and they're able to build that squad around him. That window is at some point going to close on them where they are going to have to start paying the quarterback and other players. And it's not going to be as easy to stay as competitive. You rarely see teams be able to year in, year out be competitive like that unless you have an incredible generational talent like a Tom Brady, like a Patrick Mahomes leading that offense. And as good as Purdy is, he's no Tom Brady. He's not Pat Mahomes, and neither is Kirk Cousins. And so we need to pull the Band-Aid off, move on from Kirk Cousins, and focus on the future. Vikings fans forget that in our past, we've had teams with Kirk Cousins, with Brett Favre, Dante Culpepper, some bigger names. But in between, we've had Christian Ponder, Tavares Jackson, Gus Frerotte, Brad Johnson, a Case Keenum. We've had a lot of guys who are lesser talent, not necessarily guys that you want starting for your team, but we've remained competitive every time. We are every other year basically in the playoffs. We'll survive without Kirk Cousins at quarterback. And theoretically, we could thrive too. And I'm looking forward to a future that has that in store because I have to assume that unless Kirk Cousins has a change of heart and is willing to take an extremely team friendly deal, he will not be back with the Vikings. And when I say extremely team friendly, I feel like it is kind of egregiously unfriendly. He offered to take a discount to the Vikings last year. The starting line was around the Daniel Jones contract of 40 million a year, and it was stated that Kirk Cousins was willing to take less than that, so somewhere in the 35 to 38 million dollar range, which is a heavy discount for Kirk Cousins because he's a better quarterback than Daniel Jones, in my opinion. I think both objectively and subjectively. But he was willing to take less to extend here with the Vikings, and the Vikings said no. Now, if we wanted to continue forward with him, that would have been the time to do it. But the team kind of put their foot in the ground and said, no, we can't continue doing this. And I think that they have to stick with that going into this offseason. Now, Danielle Hunter, on the other hand, he is a guy that is 29 years old, one of the best edge rushers in the league, good against the run, good against the pass, good against everything. He's homegrown talent. He is got less miles on him than you would think because of some years with injury to the neck. But he looked phenomenal in Brian Flores' defense last year. And we need to continue having that edge rush. We need to continue having that talent on our defense. He is a guy that I absolutely think that we can re-sign. We also are going to be losing defensive end Marcus Davenport, who barely played last year and was a wasted free agent signing. Linebacker Jordan Hicks, who is a good role player, and I would be fine with bringing him back on a short-term deal. Guard Dalton Reisner, who filled in for Ezra Cleveland, who we ended up trading to the Jaguars last year because he's a free agent now. Dalton Reisner, I like. He's good against the pass, bad against the run. Could price himself out in the market, but I think that we need at least one guy on our team, even if we were to go out and draft a guy or sign a free agent guard. He's the type of guy that is a good swing guard, a good backup, high tier backup where if someone falls down, gets hurt, you can put him in and not feel like your offensive line is going to be trash. Tackle Oli Udo, I like him. If he can be brought back on a minimum deal, that's fine. If not, I'm okay with walking away as well. Kicker Greg Joseph, he's milk toast. If we can find someone with higher upside, I'm all for it. Running back Cam Akers, also coming off yet another injury. I like Cam Akers. I like what he brought to our team this year. Probably not coming back unless it is an extremely cheap deal. Wide receiver Brandon Powell, priority signing. He'll probably be our number 3 wide receiver this year, and he looked great this year coming over from the Rams. And that's because KJ Osborne is also a free agent, a homegrown talent, but a guy who started to have a bunch of drops this year, didn't look as good as he did in previous years, and still has probably priced himself out, where Brandon Powell is a cheaper but more effective option. And then lastly, DJ Wanham, another homegrown talent, primarily just an edge rusher, not great against the run, but we don't have edge rushers. If Danielle Hunter is gone, we don't have anyone to play the edges. We need to bring DJ Wanham back despite him being injured at the end of the year. And I think that he can probably be brought back on a pretty cheap deal. Now, starting off with 19.7 million in effective cap, that's a tough ask to bring all those guys back, though contracts can definitely be loaded into future years. But there are several players that are going to afford our team the ability to get a lot of extra cap space. One of them being Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith is set to potentially retire, and if he doesn't, we're probably going to cut him. That's going to give us a bunch of cap room, another 10, 12 million in cap. Early estimates from what I've seen from people in Vikings land playing around with salary cap calculators with minimal cuts, guys that are not important or integral to the squad, and Harrison Smith, plus a Justin Jefferson re-signing and structuring of Daniil's contract, who also has dead money, pushing it a little bit into the future, we're looking closer to 42 to 48 million in adjusted available cap. You can do a lot of damage with that. Now, team needs, we need a quarterback because we're going to be moving on from Kirk Cousins, edge rusher, defensive line, cornerback, interior offensive line, running back, wide receiver. So quarterback, it's obvious. You don't have Kirk Cousins, you need a quarterback. You're going in with Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins. That's not a starting quarterback group. Not one that you really want to have. Edge rusher, Danielle Hunter is a big part of that. I don't know that we'll be able to go out and get another edge rusher in free agency because while the market is flooded with good talent, it is going to be difficult because of price competitiveness. Defensive line in general, we do not have any interior defensive linemen of note. Having a good interior rusher would be extremely helpful. Justin Madubuike would be obviously the number 1 target, but he's going to be expensive as well. If there's someone worth spending that money on, though, it would be him at 26 years old. That's a guy that you want to sign to a long-term contract, get his best years on your team, and he's worth that money. Another option would be a Christian Wilkins, who's a little bit older, but he's coming from the Dolphins and played with Flores. Flores knows him. Flores used him, and Wilkins was great under Flores. He's had a little bit of dip in recent years, and part of that's probably age and scheme changes, but he would be a fantastic fit here on this defense in the interior. Cornerback. This is an area that I don't know that we're going to do a lot to address. We might get a draft pick at some point, but we have some guys that can play there. We just didn't have the defensive line or that front seven to provide pressure to support those guys as well as they should have. We also have a lot of young cornerbacks that are still developing. So there's some hope there that we can get at least average play out of those guys. Interior offensive line. So left guard, if Dalton Reiser is not back, that is a huge hole. Right guard, Ed Ingram played a lot better last year, but we could still use another guard to compete, a long-term option there at the left guard spot. I could see the team going after a free agent in this respect, especially if we're able to get one at a reasonable enough deal, but a long enough deal where they're going to be able to be a part of this line for the future. Also, center Garrett Bradbury. He is an average to below average center. He's still on contract for another year. If we are able to find our way into a center, particularly through the draft, this is a decent year for centers in the draft. That's a route that I would go as well there. Running back, Ty Chandler looked great last year. We need a compliment to him. A name that has been floated around quite a bit, which excites me, is Saquon Barkley. A Saquon Barkley on the team would be insane. I think that he's going to get 12 to 14 million per year, but PFF thinks that he might only be getting 6 mil per year or so. If that's the case, I think a lot of teams are going to be in on him. I would be willing to pay more for him, though, closer to that 10 mil a year range, because I think that's going to just bolster our offense in a way that we haven't seen since early Dalvin Cook or Adrian Peterson. And then lastly, wide receiver. We have Justin Jefferson, we have Jordan Addison, and if we bring Brandon Powell back, we have a good trio. You got TJ Hawkinson, who might not be back till the middle of the year because of his ACL and MCL repair surgeries. But another wide receiver option to push that third spot, or to basically create the three deep of old where we had Jake Reed, Chris Carter, and Randy Moss, that would be fantastic. But it's a lesser need for sure. The Vikings have the number 11 pick in the NFL draft with 9 total draft picks. Our issue is that we've got our first round pick, our second round pick, and then no third round pick. And then we have, a couple fourths, a couple fifths. If we want to be aggressive in this draft to try to move up for a quarterback, one of those top 3 guys, it is going to take a lot of draft capital. And that third round pick would be very helpful in this whole equation. The chances of us moving up for a quarterback probably will involve multiple first round picks and very potentially our second round pick this year. If that happens, that means that we won't have a pick until day 3 other than that quarterback. And when you're trying to build a young new roster, you kind of have to balance that out. You have to be able to get youth in because not every player is going to hit. So you want to take as many of those shots as you can, higher shots if possible. And getting rid of that second round pick, that would be pretty difficult to deal with. And that's one of the things that is going to be talked about in this draft quite a bit. Will the Vikings be very aggressive in order to move up to get one of those top 3 quarterbacks, Akale Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels? I think that they are at least going to be in on the conversation. The word is that last year they attempted to get Anthony Richardson, offering 3 first-round picks, extra picks beyond that, and Daniil Hunter in a trade package to the Colts to try to get Anthony Richardson, and they said no. If we were that aggressive last year, how aggressive are they going to be this year when they don't have a quarterback on roster that is a starting capable quarterback? The other thing is that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and particularly Kevin O'Connell were brought into this team to lead the offense into the future, and that doesn't mean continuing forward with Kirk Cousins. I truly believe that Kevin O'Connell was brought in here to find a quarterback, to develop a quarterback, and get us into that spot where we are on a 5-year rookie contract deal where we can build the rest of our squad around a young talent and let KOC develop this quarterback. So I 100% believe that we will find a quarterback in this draft. It's just where will we find them? We could wait till pick 11 and take one of the 4, 5, 6 guys, a McCarthy, Penix, or Nix. That's definitely a little bit scarier to me, though, and I will get into this into our draft shows. JJ McCarthy is not only growing on me, but a lot of pundits have talked about JJ McCarthy being a second round pick. But it's not now sounds like the draft analysts and experts are kind of coming out and being like, y'all have it wrong. He might be a top 10 pick. Jim Harbaugh said that he thought he'd be the top quarterback off the board, and I fully don't believe that. That's Jim, championing his guy from Michigan. But I don't think that he's completely wrong. I think that there is talent there. There is something there and a lot to build on from a 21-year-old. Other than that, in the draft, I think that we really, really need to focus on finding edge rush help and interior defensive line help. If you're not able to get them out of week A through free agency, that's where you need to go after a Tavondre Sweat or something like that, a big, meaty guy in the middle, and then more edge rush help. All those other positions, interior offensive line and stuff like that, running back, those are focuses that can definitely be had day 2 and day 3. But edge rusher, defensive line, and quarterback, those are the big points of emphasis for the Vikings going into this offseason. And as a little hint, I'm pretty sure that I'll end up doing Vikings specific breakdowns on how I would run the offseason if I was the GM of the Minnesota Vikings. But I guess I'm just not as cute as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. All right. Next up, Chicago Bears. They hold the number 1 overall pick. They finished the year 7-10, and this team actually looked like they were starting to pick up steam a little bit. Brian Poles blew the whole thing up last year and has slowly been rebuilding. And that has happened because of a lot of draft picks, decent picks, and also having a quarterback on a rookie contract in Justin Fields. The question is going to be what happens now with Justin Fields, because the expectation is that the Bears, with that first overall pick, are going to take a quarterback, particularly Caleb Williams, because he looks potentially generational, Patrick Mahomes esque. Um, they also have the 9th overall pick with 6 total draft picks, so they've got a lot to go after there in the first round. They can really stack this roster with those first round picks. Not to mention, if they move on from Justin Fields, he's probably getting at least a second round pick in return. So you're going to have a bunch of high draft picks for this Chicago Bears team. There is some rumors swirling around that Poles would be willing to trade that first overall pick and ride with Justin Fields, and that he would need a incredible amount of picks in return, regardless of who goes after that first pick. And I kind of like that idea because you can absolutely build your roster through the draft that way. And then hopefully in future years move on and get a quarterback if you want to from Justin Fields. I'm not a huge Justin Fields fan. I think that he can be Lamar Jackson light, but more like Dollar Tree Lamar Jackson. I'm not a huge fan of him as a passer, as a runner. He's pretty good, but we haven't seen full development from him. Playing under Luke Getsy did not help him at all, and being on just a terrible team is extremely difficult to look really good. But there's been times that he's shown some star power. So if they want to ride with him, they can. I think that they'll move on though, because not only can they get pick compensation back from him, possibly get an upgrade at quarterback from drafting number 1 overall, they're resetting that quarterback market. Talk about the contracts. Just got done talking about the contracts with the Vikings. Having a quarterback on a rookie wage scale is huge for building your team into the future. Now, the Bears, they finished tied for 22nd on offense and 28th on defense, according to PFF, but they do have a lot of nice pieces there that they're building from with DJ Moore and, trading for that Commanders defensive end. They've got some pieces there. They are looking like they are on the slow up and up. So continuing forward, you can expect the Bears to start to become pretty competitive. And the thought process is with that first pick and 9th pick, you're going to get a Caleb Williams, and the 9th pick, you can either get the best defensive player or another talented wide receiver potentially on offense in Roma Dunze or Malik Neighbors. And if you're able to get one of those 2 guys who are typically viewed as top 5 level wide receivers, number 1 wide receivers in most drafts that don't have Marvin Harrison Jr., that would be a pretty good get for that Bears team. And I'm not looking forward to playing against that year in, year out. Now the Bears do have 34.7 million in effective cap space adjusted for different contracts and things like that, and obviously they can build more. Right now, they're planning on having pending free agents of Yannick Ngakoue, tight end Robert Tanyan, running back Deonta Foreman, quarterback Jalen Johnson, wide receiver Equinemius St. Brown, and wide receiver Darnell Mooney. Now Mooney is a guy who had a down year for sure. He's had some injuries, but he showed a lot of talent 2-3 years ago, and he's someone that I'd be interested in bringing back if I were them, but I understand if they move on, and he's probably going to find a spot on a roster pretty quick. The other name here, the big one, cornerback Jalen Johnson. He's actually one of the better cornerbacks in the league. I'd say top 5 cornerbacks in the league, and this guy is set to get paid. He's another guy that I would love my Vikings to go out there and open up the checkbook for because he is fantastic. But the Bears really, really should do whatever they can to try to bring him back. Now it seems like he kind of tried to force his way out last year, allowed him to look at to other teams to trade. Nothing materialized. If the Bears let him out of the house, he's going to be one of the top paid free agents, especially probably the top paid defensive back in the free agency this year. Um, The Bears, this is the interesting part of the draft for me at the beginning is, do they go Caleb Williams? Do they stick with Justin Fields? And if they stick with Justin Fields, how are they going to maneuver their picks around? All right, next up, we have the Green Bay Packers. They finished the year 9-8. They had a better second half of the year than the first half of the year. Offensively, they ranked ninth. Defensively, they ranked 21st. They have 8 total draft picks and are picking number 25. They were able to make it into the wild card round of the playoffs this year, um, and were able to beat the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I am absolutely biased about this team, but I think that they are relatively overhyped, specifically Jordan Love. Now, if I will give props to this team in one place, it'll be that they have done a good job in developing some youth talent, particularly at the wide receiver spot. They've got some guys there at wide receiver who late round picks, lesser names, things like that, that rookies this year, rookies last year are developing into guys that look like number 2, number 3 style receivers, and you put a good quarterback around them, they're going to be really competitive. Not Christian Watkins, Watson, whatever his name is. It's terrible. He's a one trick pony and he's always hurt. That being said, Jordan Love, after sitting behind Aaron Rodgers for years and years and years, I would expect him to have at least a little bit better accuracy than he had. He's one of the most inaccurate starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Um, because he was slinging around, because his receivers were making plays for him, and his average depth of target wasn't great. Those receivers were making plays and making him look good. His stats got inflated. People are kind of lauding over it. I think that, hey, they can continue forward with that, and it's going to make him look good, but it is still overhyping of Jordan Love as a quarterback. And it's the team around him, specifically that offense, that is making him look good. I wouldn't get too hyped up about it if I was a Packers fan, just because, look, he's already on second contract. He's expensive. You're going to have to just have young guys around him constantly. You've lost out on that rookie quarterback wage scale. And to me, he's going to be a middle of the tier at best quarterback in the NFL as a starter. Right now, they have an adjusted effective cap space of $6.9 million, not a lot to work with. You're already paying your quarterback. They're going to be losing offensive tackle Josh Neiman, cornerback Keyshawn Nixon, Darnell Savage at safety, running back A.J. Dillon, strong safety Jonathan Owens, and guard John Runyon. I would be looking to bring back almost all of these guys. Neiman is a starter. Cornerback Keyshawn Nixon, a starter. Darnell Savage, a starter. A.J. Dillon, you could probably get away with moving off in running back just because of where running backs are in this league. Safety Jonathan Owens. Do you want Candace Owens on your sideline still? I mean, Jonathan Owens was pretty solid this year. Guard John Runyon, a starter. Those are all guys you want to bring back. You have 6.9 million in cap space. It's tough to do that. The last thing I'll say is add some cap space here. Guys like Jair Alexander absolutely could be on the move. It seems like things have kind of soured with that team a little bit, and him, his play has dropped off significantly, unusually significantly in the past year or two. So he could be a guy that they could try to trade. They still lack a true number 1 wide receiver. They need to replace Bakhtiari at the tackle spot. And Jordan Love, I guess you're going to ride with him for a bit until you consecutively stop making the playoffs, I believe. The other thing I'll say with him is he doesn't seem to have the it gene. When put in a clutch moment where he could go out and win a game, unlike previous quarterbacks that you've had there, he doesn't have it. We saw that versus in the playoffs this year. Like, we saw it in the regular season this year. He doesn't have the it gene. Lost to Tommy DeVito, man. Like, I don't think that they're that good. I think that they're absolutely overhyped. One team that's not overhyped, the Detroit Lions. They made it to the NFC Championship game this year. I'm super happy for them, even if they are an NFC North team. Like, it is cool to see your little brother kind of do good. And they finished the year 12-5. This Dan Campbell led team was fun to watch. Their atmosphere around them was fun. And we brought it up on the show before. They're kind of culty there. The way that they're able to keep guys in house, like Ben Johnson decides to not leave. Aaron Glenn decides to not leave. And that's the atmosphere around there with Dan Campbell. Offensively, they're second-ranked offense in the league. Defensively, they were tied for 18th, but defense was definitely their weak point, especially on that back end, the defensive backs. And the biggest questions around this team is, will Dan Campbell's hyper aggressiveness be able to be something that can continue to be a good thing for them? Uh, they kind of potentially lost in the playoffs due to that hyper aggressiveness. Now, a lot of things factor into those losses, but that's going to be the question: is does Dan Campbell need to adjust specifically for game situations like that? But I think that would kind of lose them some of their team identity. Um, this team is in need of cornerback help. This is the biggest spot for this team where they need some help is at cornerback. Edge rusher, it could also be used, some interior defensive line. And then wide receiver, they're potentially going to be losing some wide receivers this year. So that would be a good thing as well as restocking some of their interior offensive linemen. But realistically, this team, despite some of the pending free agents that they're going to have, is still going to be very competitive. And they've got the money to go out there, sign some guys, re-sign guys, and make this team even better. So they have 45.3 in expected effective cap space adjusted. They are set to lose defensive end Charles Harris, safety Chauncey Gardner Johnson, cornerback Emmanuel Mosley, guard Halapuli Vaitai. Fuck that up. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds, guard Graham Glasgow, offense or outside linebacker Jalen Reeves Maven, guard Jonah Jackson, and outside linebacker James Houston. Now, a bunch of those guys are probably going to be retained and brought back, but there's also the potential for them re-signing Jared Goff, who's been pretty good for them. The thing is that Goff was getting paid from his days with the Rams, but that was such a long time ago that that contract actually was very tenable compared to the salary cap for the current NFL. If they're going to start paying him real money, which he's going to start getting paid good, 40 to 45 million a year, it's going to make it a little bit difficult to adjust this roster. But right now, they're so young on that roster that they have stars all over the place and they're not having to pay them exorbitant amounts of money yet. They are in their window. So if you're going to pay the quarterback, it's okay because you still have another year to build both through free agency and the draft with their 7 picks before that quarterback contract really starts to affect you in a negative way. Um, as far as building this team, look on the defensive side of the ball. That is the biggest thing. Yes, do they need a little bit help in the interior offensive line because of guys who are aging out? Yeah, but it's not a huge priority right away. Uh, defensive back, cornerback, safety, absolutely needed, and then a little bit more pass rush. And I think that the team has both the cap and the picks in order to do that. Um, the fun thing though with Detroit as well, expect them to draft guys that they want and guys that they like, not necessarily only focused on the position that they need. You see them go out last year and take a running back high in the draft. You see them take a Sam Laporta. You see them take linebacker Jack Campbell. They're taking guys that they like that are Lions players that aren't necessarily huge needs because they're going to make their team better. So just because they need a cornerback doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to take one. I still think they will, but it doesn't mean that that is going to be the only spot that they look. But congratulations to the Lions on what they did this year. Super proud of them. We'll see if they can continue it going forward. And with that, that is the final episode and installment of this series on the offseason outlooks for all 32 NFL teams. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys are getting ready for the big game. So sit back, enjoy it. And Mike and I will be back to you next week to go over all the other stuff of the offseason, draft picks, free agencies, and the results of the game. Have a good one.